President Donald Trump repeats his claim that Greenland should become part of the United States, saying it is needed for national security. Greenland and Denmark reject the pressure, saying any discussion must follow proper channels and international law. An overnight Russian air attack on Kiev and its region kills 2 people, Ukrainian officials have said. Authorities say these are the first reported deaths in strikes on the capital this year. Israel and Syria are set to resume talks in Paris today after progress towards a security deal stalled. The 2-day meeting follows pressure from President Donald Trump, who has been pushing for an agreement. The US president warns tariffs on India could rise if New Delhi does not reduce purchases of Russian oil. He says pressure is growing as trade talks remain unresolved and some Indian exports already face high duties. We now start with our top story of the hour, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that it is up to the United States to justify its actions in Venezuela after capturing President Nicolas Maduro, describing the situation as not straightforward. He also emphasized the need for a peaceful transition to democracy in Venezuela, while calling Nicolas Maduro as illegitimate and accusing him of causing untold misery across Venezuela. This comes as the United States captured Maduro in a raid on the 3rd of January and took him to New York to face drug trafficking charges. Let's listen in to what the UK Prime Minister had to say. Now joining us is Glenn Grant, an ex-advisor to the Defence Minister of Ukraine and geopolitical commentator. He joins us live from Riga in Latvia. Of course, Glenn, Keir Starmer faces a lot of opposition domestically in the United Kingdom, to say the very least. A lot of people have said that Starmer should be criticising Donald Trump more in his actions both at home and abroad. But can Starmer afford to?
Is a really good question. I mean, I think most people don't realise that the UK nuclear system basically depends upon America. And so our last line of defence, or our most important line of defence against Russia at the moment, is in the hands of Donald Trump rather than being in our own hands. So it's quite important that we do actually keep alongside him. But that does not mean that Keir Starmer should fall over and wiggle his legs in the air, as he seems to have done. You mentioned his unpopularity. Well, I can tell you that social media in UK today was about 95% saying he should have been harder with Donald Trump and only about 5% supporting him.
Yeah, indeed, Glenn. And of course, this has come after many issues that the UK public have raised their concerns about Keir Starmer's and the British attitude towards the Trump administration. Of course, the majority of the British public are against Donald Trump. How have you analysed how he has interacted with the president? Of course, that charm offensive has very much indeed been up, along with other world leaders. Of course, that's how you get to Donald Trump. Leaving domestic policy behind, how have you analysed how the UK Prime Minister has handled Donald Trump's second term in its entirety?
Well, I mean, to use that good expression, he's been greasy. He appears to have, wrung Donald at every possible opportunity for doing so without doing it too much, and basically following the great line of, you're the best president we've ever had sort of arguments. There's no thought whatsoever that he's been against Donald Trump on anything so far. At least, let's just say, he hasn't said so, nor has he even hinted so. that I was firm with him, or I raised this, or I raised that. That's a difficult subject. He seems to have sort of bowed down to Donald at every opportunity. I'm not sure that's a good thing. I'm not sure that's a good thing in the long term, because Donald does not like weakness. He bites it whenever he gets that opportunity. So it may go the wrong way for Great Britain in this case.
Glenn, stay with us. We have a related development coming up next. And Venezuela's interim leadership has announced the formation of a high-level commission aimed at securing the release of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores following their capture by the United States military forces. The announcement was made on state broadcaster VTV by Communications Minister Freddy Nunes, who confirmed that the commission would focus exclusively on diplomatic and political efforts to free the detained leaders. Nunes said the commission would be chaired by National Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez, alongside Foreign Minister Ivan Gil, Camilla Fabri and himself. He described the body as a coordinated national response to what authorities in Caracas view as an external intervention that led to Maduro's removal from power. Let's take a listen in.
Dos comisiones. La primera es la comisión de alto nivel para la liberación del presidente Nicolás Maduro Moros y de la primera dama y primera combatiente Celia Flores de Maduro. Esta comisión de alto nivel estará presidida por el doctor Jorge Rodríguez Gómez, presidente de la Asamblea Nacional y jefe del Diálogo y la Paz de Venezuela, por nuestro canciller Iván Gil, por la compañera Camila Fabri y por este servidor.
Glenn joins us once again. Glenn, given that the United States military bypassed all the Venezuelan security and managed to take the president from his residence, how likely do you think it will be that Venezuela and its allies will be able to negotiate diplomatically the release of the toppled leader?
Easily. I don't think that this is a diplomatic deal at all. This is a financial deal, and it will depend completely upon them touching Donald Trump's pocket. If they make a good enough deal to Donald Trump and USA, Maduro will suddenly get a pardon, or it'll be quietly whisked under the carpet and none of us will ever know. So that's what he's been doing with everybody else. I don't see that this is going to be any different. I mean, they only invaded because of money and oil. Let's be blunt about it. So, touch Donald's pocket and let's see what happens next. And I'm pretty sure that it'll be a positive response.
Okay, once again, we move on and we move over to Europe. And the German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul says that Greenland belongs to Denmark and that the NATO alliance could discuss strengthening its protection if necessary. Wadephul was speaking after US President Donald Trump made renewed threats to take over Greenland, a prospect that alarmed NATO allies and has taken on a new urgency after Trump followed through on threats to topple Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Trump has repeatedly said he wants to take over Greenland, an ambition first voiced in 2019 during his first presidency. Let's listen in to what the German Foreign Minister Wadephul had to say.
Und zu Grönland kann ich nur sagen, Grönland ist genauso wie die Färöer Bestandteil des dänischen Königreiches. Und da Dänemark der NATO angehört, wird auch Grönland prinzipiell von der NATO zu verteidigen sein. Und wenn es dort weitere Erfordernisse gibt, die Verteidigungsanstrengungen bezüglich Grönlands zu verstärken, dann werden wir das im Rahmen der Allianz miteinander zu besprechen haben. Es ist eine komplexe Situation, die auch eine genaue Analyse von uns allen verlangt. Diese Analyse ist nicht abgeschlossen. Dazu gehören natürlich Aspekte des internationalen Rechts. Und hier hat der Kollege schon richtigerweise auf die von uns beiden unterstützte Erklärung der Hohen Beauftragten hingewiesen, die ja die Aspekte des internationalen Rechts unterstrichen hat und die gemeinsame europäische Position hierzu auch formuliert hat. Diese Fragen werden wir selbstverständlich auch weiter mit den Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika diskutieren. und haben dazu nach wie vor Fragen. Das habe ich heute Morgen schon klar gemacht. Aber richtig bleibt eben auch, das, was Herr Maduro dort gemacht hat, war ein verbrecherisches Regime.
Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer also reiterated his support to Greenland, stating that no one other than Greenland and Denmark should decide the future of Greenland. Let's listen in to the UK Prime Minister.
The future of Greenland is for Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark, and for Greenland and the future of Denmark only. And Denmark is a very close ally of the UK, both in Europe and in NATO, and it's very important that we're clear about the principles applicable here. Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark must determine the future of Greenland, and nobody.
Glenn, is this the first time NATO allies are publicly preparing for the possibility of a US territorial move against another NATO partner?
Well, I'm sorry, you just got that wrong. They're not preparing, they're not doing anything, they're just talking. And I think this is fundamentally much more serious than people give credit to, because if Trump does this, if he actually does this, then he's driven a coach and horses through NATO and through the relationship of the West that has stood solid against everybody else, since the Second World War. So we are in the point where you're actually looking at the possibility of USA being at war against European countries. And I don't see the European leaders taking this as seriously as they should. They all need to go to America and line up in front of Donald Trump and say, you want to go to war with us? Fine, go to war with us. But that's the only thing that's going to work. If they carry on just talking like like Starmer's talking, blah, 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 Donald Trump's going to do something. And then we're going to look stupid, and it's going to be dangerous.
Glenn Grant, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us here on the broadcast and for taking the time. We now move on, and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has said that now is not the right time for Russian President Vladimir Putin to visit Budapest, citing a lack of urgent bilateral issues. Speaking at an annual news conference for international media, Orbán said Hungary would be willing to host high-level talks between the United States and Russia if they were to take place. Let's listen in.
Ezt egyébként mind a két érintett elnökkel személyesen is tisztáztam. A Putyin orosz elnök látogatása Magyarországon nem időszerű, nem látok ilyen igényt. Ugye tudjuk, hogy Magyarország azon nagyon kevés országok közé tartozik a nyugati világban, ahol semmilyen jogi vagy politikai akadály egy ilyen látogatásnak nem lenne. Tehát ha erre volna ok, igény, például egy béketárgyalás, ami elegendő ok, akkor ennek semmi akadálya nincs.
Orbán also suggested that senior American officials could visit Hungary in the spring ahead of domestic political events. Hungary is set to hold parliamentary elections in April, with Orbán seeking re-election. In October last year, Trump announced that he and Putin would meet in Hungary to discuss ending the war in Ukraine, but that meeting did not take place. Ross Feingold joins us now, a political analyst joining us live from Taipei in Taiwan. What do you think of Hungary's stance here, Ross? Of course, some EU states saying that Budapest is far too warm towards Moscow. Is Orbán positioning Hungary as a bridge between Russia and the West, or as a political opportunist?
I don't know if I'd call him a bridge so much as he's had very strong opinions with regard to what his own country's relationship with Russia should be. He's been neutral to even supportive of Russia throughout the period of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and he's been critical of his European Union and NATO partners for their support for Ukraine. But he did just visit Moscow in November, where they signed agreements with regard to energy supply. He already obtained a waiver of U.S. sanctions to continue to import energy from Russia. He's facing an election in April, so he's probably concerned about the opposition using his relationship with Putin against him to say he's undemocratic, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also possible that the U.S. Said to Orban that we don't think right now is the time for you to be hosting Putin while we're still trying to bring together or put together some kind of ceasefire or peace arrangement with Ukraine. And it might be working at cross purposes or create mixed messages if you were to host him at this point in time. So all of the above factors might have played into what Orban said and basically putting on pause a visit from Putin.
Exactly. Ross, do stay with us as we move next to the Middle East for our next update. And Iran has accused Israel of attempting to undermine its national unity after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly backed the ongoing protests across the Islamic Republic. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Bouquet said Israel and the United States were inciting violence, warning that external actors were seeking to exploit unrest to sow division inside the country. Let's take a listen in.
رژیم صهیونیستی مترصد سوء استفاده از هر فرصتی برای تفرقه انگیزی و برای هدف قرار دادن انسجام ملی. این رو باید بسیار مراقبت کرد. اقداماتی یا اظهاراتی که امثال نخست وزیر رژیم صهیونیستی یا برخی از مقام‌های رادیکال آمریکایی، مقام‌های تندرو آمریکایی در رابطه با مباحث داخلی ایران مطرح می‌کنند در قاموس بین‌الملل چیزی نیست جز ترغیب به خشونت، ترغیب به تروریسم، ترغیب به
The protests, which began over economic grievances last week, have rapidly expanded nationwide. Human rights groups say at least 20 protesters have been killed and around 1,000 people arrested, with demonstrations reported in more than 220 locations across 26 provinces. Netanyahu said Israel identifies with the Iranian people's struggle for freedom, calling the moment potentially historic. Ross joins us once again. Ross, of course, these protests have now expanded across the entire country. The Iranian people, of course, have toppled governments and regimes before, most notably in 1979. What do you think of these protests? Does the Iranian government genuinely fear destabilization here?
Certainly they fear destabilization, but they fear destabilization even when there's no protests going on. This is a government that tightly controls information flow to the best of its ability, controls the meetings, controls opposition gatherings, et cetera, et cetera. So this government is always on the lookout for any threats to its power. Yes, there is a history of overthrowing governments, most notably in 1979, as you mentioned. On the other hand, over the past 20 plus years, there's been at least 10 major protests of varying popularity or mass popularity across the country, some smaller, some much larger. But every time, unfortunately for the people of Iran, the government has maintained control, and very often they do use force, including lethal force. They jail people, they execute people. And now they're using another one of their frequent tools, which is the foreign boogeyman. So it's a habit of this government to blame the UK, to blame the US, or to blame Israel for whatever problems they have, usually the problems of their own making, economic mismanagement, corruption, the reason why they are sanctioned because of their ridiculous attempt to develop nuclear weapons. This is all their own doing, but one of their tools they use is to blame foreigners as well, so no surprise that they're trying that again. Will the outcome be different this time? It's too early to tell. Some of those past protests in the course of recent years have been very large, and it looked like the government's grip on power was weakening, but every time they've been able to survive.
And Ross, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, with his messaging, is consistently separating the Iranian government from the Iranian people. Does Netanyahu's public support for protesters help them, or does it strengthen the regime's narrative of these external plots that you talk about?
I don't think it helps the regime. You know, they have their core supporters. So when the regime says that foreigners are interfering, whether it's the US, UK, Israel, or others, the core supporters are going to believe the government and stand behind it. The protesters, they're probably not looking for support from Israel. They have a long list of grievances, which are well known, whether that's economic mismanagement, corruption, or repression. So they don't need any message from Prime Minister Netanyahu to explain to the Iranian people why the government should be overthrown or why they're taking to the streets to protest. So in some ways, it's also for domestic consumption in Israel as well. Netanyahu wants the people of Israel to know that he is a player in regional politics. And to some extent, that's true. Coming after events last year in 2025, the defeat of Hamas, the defeat of Hezbollah, the bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities. But Netanyahu also has to firm up his domestic political position as well. So it's no surprise that he also wants to tell a domestic audience that I'm relevant when it comes to regional politics.
And of course, the crisis that Iran are currently facing, a huge economic crisis caused by sanctions, and of course a huge water crisis in Tehran in particular, where the city might even run out of water. How do you see the Iranian government tackling these crises? The will of the Iranian protesters isn't going to go away unless that these issues are addressed. How do you see them being so?
They can address it over the long term. So in the short term, like the previous protests in recent decades, the government might be able to successfully end the protest, no matter how many people they have to kill or jail. But over the medium to the long term, a government as corrupt as this, as incompetent as this, that prioritizes rewarding insiders who are close to the government, they're not going to solve the country's problems. Those problems will continue to exist and they will continue to worsen, which means even if this round of protests is repressed, there will be future rounds of protests because the government is just that disliked and that incompetent.
Ross Feingold, stay with us as we have some further news coming in up next. And as per reports, people from different segments of society are staging a protest in the Landi Kotal region of Pakistan's Khyber province, demanding the legitimate reopening of the Torkham border. The protest has been reportedly organised under the banner of the All Borders Coordinators Council. The protests have brought together traders, transporters, tribal elders, daily wagers, political activists and members of civil society. The gathering attracted representatives of multiple organisations and groups directly affected by the closure of borders with Afghanistan since October the 12th of last year. According to reports, the speakers described the nearly 3-month closure as economic murder of thousands of people, mostly tribesmen who rely entirely on cross-border trade for their livelihoods. They have said that Torkham border has historically been an important gateway for trade, with Central Asia serving as a bustling economic hub, supporting thousands of families. Okay, we have some breaking news coming in from West Asia, and the Israeli military has warned residents of 4 villages in Lebanon to evacuate immediately, saying it was preparing to strike Hezbollah and Hamas targets in those areas. In 2 statements posted on X, the military's Arabic language spokesman, Colonel Aviche Aradi, urged civilians to leave the villages for their own safety. The locations named were Kfar Hatar and Anan in southern Lebanon, as well as Al-Marana and Ayin al-Tina in eastern Lebanon. The warnings come amid heightened tensions along Israel's northern border, where exchanges of fire between Israeli forces and armed groups have increased in recent weeks. Israeli officials have said the planned strikes are aimed at infrastructure and not civilians. There was no immediate response from Hezbollah or Hamas, and Lebanese authorities had not issued a formal statement at the time of the warnings. It remains unclear when the strikes could take place or how many residents are going to be affected. Ross Feingold joins us once again. Outside of the Gaza Strip, where of course there has been a ceasefire, strikes continue mainly in Lebanon and of course Yemen as well. But focusing in on Lebanon, of course, there was a ceasefire signed in November 2024 between the Lebanese government and Israel, not Hezbollah, however. What can you tell us about the current state of the conflict, the tensions that still remain in the region?
The key part of that ceasefire agreement was that the Lebanese central government and military were supposed to take security control of this southern region of Lebanon, and Hezbollah was supposed to pull back and eventually give up its weapons as a long-term goal. And Israel made it abundantly clear at the time that, yes, they were entering into this ceasefire, but any movement of weapons that they detect, anything that they believe is a threatening movement towards communities in northern Israel, that Israel would preemptively strike. And they've done that numerous times ever since that ceasefire was entered into over a year ago. So the ceasefire has largely held, but at times when Israel sees that Hezbollah is moving weapons, they will strike. And yeah, the Lebanese government will complain, and of course Hezbollah will complain. But who else is going to complain? I mean, the United States is not going to criticize Israel for doing that. The Syrian government is dealing with its own internal problems. They're not going to really say anything that's relevant to Israel's decision making. So Israel is in a position of strength, and it's up to the political class in Lebanon to really come to the realization that we have to end the Hezbollah problem once and for all. If we want peace and prosperity for our own people, and specifically the southern part of Lebanon, then they have to do what's necessary to rid themselves of this threat.
Ross Feingold, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. We now move on to our final story of the hour, and the European Commission has said that it is seriously looking into complaints that Elon Musk's AI tool Grok is being used to generate and disseminate sexually explicit childlike images. EU Digital Affairs spokesman Thomas Reigner has said that Grok is now offering a spicy mode showing explicit sexual content with some output generated with childlike images. Reigner has denounced it, saying that this is illegal. This is appalling at this and at that. This should have no place in Europe. Complaints of abuse began hitting Musk's X social media platform, where Grok is available after an edit image button for the generative artificial intelligence tool was rolled out in late December. Let's in fact listen into what the European Commission had to say.
I can confirm from this podium that the Commission is also very seriously looking into this matter. So we are very well aware of the fact that X or Grok, or X for Grok, is now offering a spicy mode showing explicit sexual content with some output generated with childlike images. This is not spicy. This is illegal. This is appalling. This is disgusting. This is how we see it. And this has no place in Europe.
That's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.